I'm Helen Foray. On today's program, switching political parties makes for campaigning against former friends and associates. And how's climate change going to affect the South Florida real estate market? But first, Miami International Airport saw an average of 39.5 million domestic and international passengers last year. But now the new airport director's task is to manage the new phase of renovation of the central terminal. How do you do this without killing business? We ask Emilio Gonzalez, director of the Miami-Dade Aviation Department. Emilio, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
People forget that the airport is a business, a lucrative one, but it's also one that can lose bucket loads of money. We know this. It's not ancient history. So how do you renovate the central terminal without killing business?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. The central terminal is one of many tasks. And one of the things that we're going to start looking at right now are enhancement programs before we actually get to the actual central terminal redesign. That redesign is going to be about a 10 or 12 year process. So between now and then, we need to look at what we can do with what we have. We need to optimize the gates that we have, the terminals that we have, because your airport, our airport, is in a very fortunate position right now, is that we're growing beyond expectations. And just like you can't have construction that will interrupt concessions program, you can't have constructions that will interrupt the capacity of airlines to use our gates. So it's a very swift balancing act.
When you say, Emilio, that you're going to talk about enhancements, what kind of enhancements are we looking at?
Well, what we're looking at right now, and again, this is all in the conceptual stage, but it's looking at the current terminals that we have and see how many more years use we can get out of them. We're at a situation right now where many of our partner airlines have come to us and said, hey, you know what? We're growing better and bigger than we thought we would. We're going to need more gates, and we're going to need them quicker.
Well, one of these folks, you have American Airlines and US Air. The merger has passed this huge hurdle from the Justice Department, and it's expected that merger to be finally approved. The impact for MIA is what? Well,
the impact is it will cost 2 gates for US Air. In the big scheme of things, considering that Washington Reagan Airport is going to lose many more gates as they will in New York. But the positive...
Why? Why are they going to lose?
Because of antitrust issues. Airlines have too many gates in one airport. They need to sort of spread the wealth. There was some concern that people would not have enough choices to fly, low-cost carriers. We don't have those concerns, but we sort of got wrapped up in the actual litigation. But the good news for us is that the new and improved American Airlines is going to grow. It's going to grow exponentially, and we're going to grow with them as an airport.
Well, I can imagine we're going to see a lot more flights to Latin America.
You're going to see a lot more flights to Latin America. You're probably going to see a lot more flights to other places as well. American has a very robust growth strategy for MIA, and by the way, that means a growth strategy for the county as well.
Well, one of the things that people look at is they look at MIA and they say, you know what, MIA is not as competitive when it comes to low fare carriers. Fort Lauderdale Airport really beats us at that one.
But you know what, we don't really compete against Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale has a model, we have a model. As airports go, we are probably at the upper end of the scale, but that having been said, we have a key strategic location. Airlines want to come to MIA. They can go other places, but they want to come to MIA. My job is to make sure that they come here quickly, they come here and have a wonderful experience, as well as the passengers, and to attract more of them.
Emilio, some people say that that's terrific, but one of the ways to be able to attract more people and more visitors is to develop what's known as Airport City, which is the Brazilian corporation Odebrecht's big project that has been very controversial in South Florida. Some people think that that's a great idea. Other people say, you know what, this is land that MIA should hold on to. Where do you stand on this?
Well, they're both right, because obviously you want to develop areas of the airport that will bring you more non-aviation revenue, because that allows you to keep things like landing fees down. That having been said, my job is to do what's best for the airport. And I inherited this project, as did Mayor Jimenez. We're both studying the possibilities. We're both studying what the options would be. But at the end of the day, we're always going to be on the side of what's best for the airport.
Now, and the reason I ask is because you're talking about, when we look at renovation of the central terminal. That's where the current airport hotel is. Odebrecht is looking at building a hotel which would accommodate a convention center, which maybe that could clear the overlap. But you're also talking about growth of the airport. This is airport land. Maybe the county should stay with the land.
Well, that's what we're looking at now. I mean, we have a growth spurt, so to speak, that is going to be more near-term than long-term. We have current airlines that want to expand their operations. We have new airlines that want to come into Miami that we're in contact with. And then we have other airlines that we're targeting, because we do need to have carriers to Africa, to Asia, to other parts of the Middle East. And all that is a very, very long-term but very deliberate business strategy.
So when we look at this, and one of the airlines, and I know recently Qatar or Qatar, depending on the pronunciation preference, has announced that it's coming to MIA. What does this mean? I mean, that's a big move for a Middle Eastern high-end airline.
It means a lot. Qatar Airways is probably one of the few five-star airlines in the world. They win any number of awards for best business airline, best airline in the Middle East. They have a reach to the other side of the world that we do not. For example, they fly to India, they fly to Eastern Europe, they fly to China, they fly to Australia. So by using Doha in Qatar as their hub, we're going to have immediate access to that part of the world. The interesting thing about their coming to Miami is that they're going to start operations the week before the World Cup in Brazil. So they're already looking at how they're going to be value added, bringing passengers from that part of the world into Brazil through MIA.
So I don't want to, just leave the airport city issue hanging, because there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of politics, there's a lot, including controversy in this particular issue. The land is owned by the county. That airport city would be developed.
Correct. It's airport land, yes.
It's
county land.
It's airport land. The idea originally is perhaps leasing the land to somebody to develop. But
Correct.
There's also the possibility that's also equally feasible that MIA could stay with the land, and as the airport expands, use that for airport operations instead of what airport city would be, which includes a convention center, hotel.
Or a middle ground, which is keep the land that we need and develop those areas that won't interrupt or affect any airport or aviation operations. Remember, airport city is not one parcel, it's several parcels.
So it could be a happy marriage, or it could be just something brand new drawn up.
Correct.
All over the place.
Correct.
Which means you're not giving me an answer one way or another, but that's okay. I've known you for a long time. I know how that goes. One quick question. There's an important component to the business of the airport that I don't want to leave out. Cargo.
Right.
So we have the Panama Canal opening up in 2014, just a stone's throw away. How's that going to affect the airport?
We think that the effect right now is going to be minimal. We are still the #1 cargo airport in the United States. Anything from flowers to perishables, vegetables, you name it, it comes through. The biggest aspect of our cargo operations is that planes come in full and they leave full. Which is very important for cargo operators. You don't want to go back with an empty plane. The port has been doing yeoman's work in getting their dredging done so they can compete. The post-Panamax ships. We're still going to be the #1 cargo airport in the United States. We are #1 by a lot. We're going to grow that business. It's equally important. We're the #2 international passenger airport, but we're still the #1 international cargo airport.
Have we already started for bidding out, doing requests for proposals for the central terminal renovation, or not yet?
No, what we're doing now is we're in a conceptual phase. We're looking at what needs to be done, how we can do it, what it would look like, what are the milestones. Those are the kind of things that we're doing now, the very preliminary work. But remember, the central terminal could very well be these enhancement projects that I told you about as preliminary to the actual master plan.
Do you envision at all more runways?
It would be hard. It would be hard.
Because of the land configuration.
But that having been said, we are required by the FAA to look at what we have and come up with a strategic plan for what we want to be 20 years from now. So obviously we need to look at our numbers, we need to look at our projections, and we need to look at if we're going to expand geographically. Where would that expansion take place and how it would take place?
Emilio Gonzalez, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Later in the program, climate change. You know what? It might affect the airport. Climate change and its influence on South Florida's real estate market. But next, we discuss the week in politics with Sun Sentinel's writer, Tony Mann. Stay with us. With former Florida Governor Charlie Crist switching to the Democratic Party, Republicans are now tasked with trying to defeat their former friend and colleague. Anthony Mann, political writer at the South Florida Sun Sentinel, joins us to discuss this. Tony, good to see you again.
Thanks, Helen.
Well, you have been writing about this, and of course, it's no surprise that, for example, in this case, you've been writing about former Senator George Lemieux criticizing Charlie Crist. George Lemieux actually has a much closer relationship than most with former Governor Charlie Crist.
Well, that's what made him so interesting as the choice from the Republican Party to be their #1 surrogate, attack dog, whatever you want to call him, right out of the gate when Crist made his formal announcement that he was doing what we all knew he was going to be doing. And he really went at him hard, and there's probably a combination of psychological gamesmanship and also somebody who has a lot of credibility as a person who knows Charlie Crist very well.
Can you say that they both owe each other a little something?
I think you can say that they both owe each other a great deal. George Lemieux was, remember, the maestro, as described by Crist, who orchestrated his gubernatorial win. He ran the shop when Crist was the Attorney General, and that set him on the stage and propelled him to the governorship, and then was his chief of staff early on and pushed through and negotiated things as important as the Seminole Indian Tribe Gaming Compact. So, I mean, Crist owes a great deal to George Lemieux, and Lemieux owes even more to Crist. After all, Crist set him up, in effect, as a very important and powerful lobbyist by being someone who knew the way everything was going on in Tallahassee, and then after that appointed him to the U.S. Senate. And that's a pretty elite club, the United States Senate, and having that former U.S. Senator after his name makes him a very valuable commodity.
With the understanding that he would not run for that seat because he was replacing at that point in time former Senator Mel Martinez, but that George Lemieux would not run for that seat because that seat was going to
Charlie Crist. Yes, he was the placeholder for Crist. And, of course, things didn't work out very well for then-Governor Crist. Obviously, he ended up being sort of pushed out of the Republican Party, and Marco Rubio, of course, ended up winning that Senate seat.
So, Tony, let me ask you, you know the state as few do. How excited? I know polls show that if the election were held today, that former Governor Charlie Crist would readily beat current Governor Rick Scott in this election by one poll even has it, a 10-point difference. And Charlie Crist has raised $900,000. How excited are Democrats about Charlie? I know they like him. I think a lot of people like Charlie Crist. But how excited can you be about somebody who's been a little bit of everything to everybody?
I think that they're salivating at the idea of somebody who can be a winner. And I think that really trumps any disagreement or a discomfort that many of them have. Not all of them. There are some
They're tired. In other words, they're tired of losing the governorship.
Exactly. They want to win more than anything else. And, there are some really diehard liberal activists who would love to see former Senator Nan Rich get the nomination.
And we're going to be having Nan Rich join us in a very future program. Not too future, but maybe next week or the following week she's going to be joining us to talk about this. And she's got a challenge. She
has a big challenge. She's had a tough time getting attention and an even tougher time raising money. And for now, that's working. That's okay, but you really have to have enough money to be on television and run a credible campaign.
What are the issues that you think are going to be the biggest challenge for Rick Scott to be able to overcome? I know there's that general likability, being comfortable in front of audiences and cameras. People tell me that by and large he's gotten a lot better at that. But what are the other concrete issues that you think? The economy seems to be getting better, the diversity of the, you look at the Tampa-St. Pete area, the I-4 corridor seems to be doing better. So what are we really looking at?
I think the economy is the one issue that really trumps everything else. If people are feeling good about the economy, I think that's going to help Governor Scott. And it may not even matter whether or not he had that much to do with an improving economy, just the way an improving economy probably helped President Obama in his reelection, whether or not it was his doing that the economy was getting better. But with a big time election like that, the economy really, really, really trumps everything else. I think we're going to see a very negative campaign, and they're going to try and raise every possible character issue and then some about the other guy and try and tear down the other character and plant doubts about the opposition. But in terms of substantive issues, I think it's going to be the economy. There'll be little things here and there. They'll argue about education, who's a better friend or funder of education. And
South Florida, I'm told that a big concentration of the campaign for former Governor Charlie Crist is going to be in South Florida, which means the same has to apply for Rick Scott. What are the key issues in South Florida? I know the economy, but South Florida, Broward, Miami-Dade, Palm Beach County, but Miami-Dade and Broward in particular always complain that they give more to the state than they get in return.
Well, I think big issues, to the extent issues will matter, and we could have a debate about how much issues end up really determining an election outcome, I think it'll be things like windstorm insurance and property values, that kind of thing. I mean, I think you see where there have been attacks on Governor Scott because of what's been going on with citizens. He sort of now owns that because he's the governor, and he's tried to divert attention to some extent by going after the federal government because of the whole flood insurance question. I think that's something that really resonates for South Florida voters because of the high cost of living here.
And just one last quick question. We know that Obamacare has really damaged the Democratic brand. What impact may that have on the gubernatorial election?
It could have a big impact if there still is a big problem and a lot of dissatisfied people months and months from now. I think, honestly, right now, we can't really be sure what effect it'll have.
The only thing we can hope for is that you come back and join us with great frequency, Tony Mann, to keep us up to date on what's going on.
I hope so. Thank you.
And next, buying property in South Florida in the face of climate change may surprise you. Stay with us. We have long heard that climate change is imminent, but recent projections that the entire state of Florida may be underwater have given many great pause for concern. We invited two guests to share their thoughts on the impact that climate change may have not only to the value of real estate market, but to insurance, property insurance as well. We welcome Roy Oppenheim, co-founder and senior partner in the law firm Oppenheim Law, and Shahid Hamid, director of the Laboratory for Insurance, Economic, and Financial Research, and professor in the Finance and College of Business at Florida International University. Thank you both for joining me today. So, Roy, let me start with you. Do you see that, climate change, first of all, it's projected that we could really see the impact of flooding and all of the issues related to this type of catastrophe or challenges really affecting us as early as 2060. That's really hard to get your arms around because most of us can't even think of what we're going to be doing tomorrow, much less 2060. What effect does this have on real estate values? If you judge by cranes, it's like nothing. Miami-Dade continues to grow and very close to the water at that.
First of all, thanks for having me back, Helen. It's always a pleasure to be here. I think short term, in terms of values, it probably is having little impact. But if we look at what has happened just in the Philippines, or we look at what happened in A1A last year, that a part of it was just completely washed out, we're starting to see in slow motion that long term, there are going to be serious seismic effects on the real estate market. And, if you take a look at, like, Rolling Stones just did an article a few weeks ago on Goodbye Miami, where they're anticipating that Miami could go the way of Atlantis, wherever Atlantis may be. On the other hand, maybe we're just going to go the way of Venice, where we're going to learn to adapt and deal with flooding, and people are going to put their gaiters on, and we're going to start walking on elevated platforms every few weeks or a few months, and we're just going to learn to adapt. And so, probably Shai can talk about what the likelihood of these events happening are going to be.
Well, the There are two basic effects of climate change. First of all, you have warming temperatures, which is going to create, so to speak, more intense hurricanes, but less frequent hurricanes. So when you talk about the impact on insurance, for instance, we're not completely sure. If you have less hurricanes, especially Category 1, 2, and 3, you're going to have lower losses overall. If you have more intense hurricanes, you're going to have higher losses. And I think we need more modeling to determine what the impact would be. On the other hand, you have an impact on sea level. Sea level has been rising about an inch per decade for the last, I would say, 100 years.
Now, a lot of people look at an inch and say, Shahid, that's nothing. Why should we worry about an inch or 4 inches in 40 years?
Well, if you have an increase of, say, 1 foot in the sea level, you're going to have at least $4 to $5 billion in properties affected, losses. If you have another foot, you will have 41 billion. So you have exponentially increasing losses with each inch.
So correct me if I'm wrong. It seems to me that what happens in Key West is going to be kind of a harbinger of what's going to happen to maybe the entire South Florida area over a period of time. But it's going to happen probably in slow motion because Key West is so much more vulnerable than the rest of South Florida that they're already preparing and doing some things to try and raise many of their buildings and are trying to anticipate more floods that are going to occur.
But is it in slow motion? Because there are different models that suggest different things.
Yes, it's in slow motion. It's, there's a lot of uncertainty. Sea level has been rising since 10,000 years, ever since we came out of Ice Age. So that's, there's a natural phenomena. However,
so that's part of the issue of why people find climate change so difficult to get their arms around, and then you go into the political issues or the ecological issues behind it. Is it man-made or not man-made? The fact is, it is occurring. That's all we, for the purposes of this discussion, that's all we need to worry about.
Yes, there's no controversy. All sides believe sea rise is rising. It's a question of how much.
I want to talk a little bit about the impact of insurance, because insurance obviously impacts folks who have mortgages, which is most people like you and me. But there's a whole class of people who do buy along the water, and many of it's foreign money that's coming from an inflationary economy where they're looking to put their money in a safe place. They themselves don't necessarily need to buy insurance. Maybe their condo association does, but they themselves are free to buy a condo, buy a home, and not have insurance.
Yeah, but who's going to want to insure here if you're looking at, these rising sea levels or even the possibility of fewer but stronger hurricanes?
But from their perspective, the risk that they're facing day to day of their money being deflated in an economy that is just massively inflated, meaning that their value, their buying power is dropping. The risk of a hurricane or of global warming 20 or 30 years out pales compared to the risk that they're facing every day. So from their perspective, this is not affecting the real estate market on a day-to-day basis.
But Shahid, when you look at this and you look at how insurance is impacted, it has an effect also on real estate.
Yes, it absolutely does. I mean, insurance is critical to real estate and to economic development in general. The insurance industry right now is not alarmed. It's sort of looking, trying to figure out. There's a lot of uncertainty. I think it will take another 15 to 20 years to get a handle on exactly how fast the sea is going to rise. There's a lot of controversy. We have a wide range of estimates going from something like 1 feet to all the way to 6 feet.
And yet it has a very immediate effect, Shahid, when we look at where we are right now as far as Miami-Dade County has to be looking at refurbishing its water pipe infrastructure for water and sewer.
Yes.
And this has to have an impact on the type of engineering that's designed for that.
Yes. There's no question that at some point some investment has to be made. But we have to also look at when it should be done. You don't want to build barriers and so on for something that's going to happen 50 years down the line. So it's a question of what sort of investment we need to make, what sort of technology we need to adapt, as well as when we should do it.
And of course, you say that we really don't know. And prior to taping, you were telling me that it's going to take some time before we can have a real sense of when we're looking at a critical time. How much time are we looking at?
I think we're talking about 15 to 20 years.
So, Roy, some people would say that maybe before you sell property, let's say not right now, but 15 years from now, there should be a disclaimer that says, you know what, your property may have very little value once a big storm comes.
You know, there are some disclaimers that we have now. One's for radon, and, you know, I don't know the last time someone died of radon poisoning here in Florida, but it is a common occurring natural phenomenon. You have these radon warnings, and you also have these lead paint warnings, which are legitimate, but they usually go back to properties that are pretty old. So there is a history in the real estate business to provide certain kinds of warnings. I think doing it now would be a little bit like Chicken Little. But at the same time, I think that it's going to have to be a discussion at some point once the modeling is in place to let people know that they're in a vulnerable area and that at some point their value of real estate may decline because of ecological impact.
And Shahid, we have a minute left. What do we need to know? What's, given your studies, what's the most important thing viewers need to take away from this debate from your perspective?
Well, sea level is going to rise, and we need to be aware of it. And at some point, maybe 10 years, 15 years down the line, we'll have better information. And at that point, I think we have to be concerned.
And of course, your investigation and your work at FIU is very critical to best understand what's going on.
Yes, particularly impact on hurricane losses as well as storm surge.
And Roy, as far as property values, you indicate that there's no immediate effect, but, you know, I mean, people would look at this and say, when I buy a property, I want to hold on to it for a few years, and not just for speculation, but, you know, there is a real chance that certainly coastal development will have an impact.
When I was on this show, I think back in 05 or 06, way before Katrina, I had said to you that there would be an exogenous event that would ultimately knock us off the real estate bubble. I'm going to say it again. There'll be an exogenous event. It'll be a climate-based event this time that will knock us off.
More than Hurricane Sandy or Superstorm Sandy?
Well, Katrina did it at that point, and it was because of part of the CNN effect, because it was just such a constant impact, and it affected all of our collective psyche, and I think it affected our confidence in ourselves. And I think to some extent we could end up having such an event, unfortunately, down the road again.
I hope it's a long way down the road, but we'll see. We're out of time. I'd like to thank Roy Oppenheim and Shahid Hamid for joining us, and I'm Helen Foray. Thank you for watching. See you next time.